465 arrests. That's the number Jasmine Crockett threw in Karoline Leavitt's face as the chamber exploded on live television. For 21 brutal seconds, America watched Leavitt sweat, stumble, and finally admit the unthinkable, that the White House itself had ordered fake crime numbers to deceive the nation. The outrage was instant, the betrayal unbearable, the stakes nothing less than democracy itself. But here's the question that chills every American tonight. If they can rewrite crime, what else have they already rewritten? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. To broadcast cut in like a blade, no warning, no music, just the raw image of the Capitol chamber, every seat filled, every breath caught in the air. The silence wasn't peace, it was dread, the kind that makes your skin crawl when you know something ugly is about to be dragged into the light. Across the nation, millions leaned closer to their screens, sensing that tonight was not another hearing. Tonight was a reckoning. At the center sat Jasmine Crockett, shoulders squared, eyes burning. She wasn't just a lawmaker, she was the storm waiting to break. Her presence demanded attention, not through volume, but through the unshakable stillness of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to expose. Her chest rose slowly, controlled, but inside her heart thundered. She carried not just her own rage, but the fury of every citizen who had been lied to, misled, discarded. She knew one truth: if she faltered, the lie would stand. Then came the sound of doors creaking open. Karoline Leavitt entered. At first glance, she wore the mask of confidence back straight, lips curled into a smirk rehearsed for the cameras. But under the harsh lights, her skin was pale, her hands clutched her papers so tightly they trembled. She knew what awaited her. To the world, she was a messenger. To Jasmine, she was a conspirator, the face of a machine that had reprogrammed numbers, twisted facts, and buried the truth under a mountain of deception. Every step she took toward the witness table felt like a drumbeat of guilt. The room was lined with predators and witnesses alike. Janine Pirro of the DOJ sat posed, eyes sharp as razors, waiting for the kill. Jen Jordan leaned forward, jaw tight, ready to interrupt with outrage. Marjorie Taylor Greene whispered venom to her colleagues, a snake coiled to strike. Above, reporters gripped their pens like weapons, cameras aimed at every flicker of expression. And outside, the voices of citizens roared, "Truth matters, truth matters." A cry that seeped into the chamber walls and refused to be ignored. Leavitt sat. Jasmine did not move. The two women locked eyes, and for an instant the hearing dissolved into a duel. Leavitt's smile twitched, faltered. Jasmine's gaze did not waver. Around them, the air thickened, the tension snapping like electricity before a lightning strike. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady, low, but carrying the force of a gavel striking marble. "Tonight," she declared, every syllable echoing through the chamber, "America will learn who dares to rewrite truth itself." The words dropped like a hammer. Leavitt flinched, a journalist gasped. Someone's pen slipped and clattered to the floor. Outside, the crowd erupted louder, as if they had heard the line through the walls. The nation was no longer just watching, it was holding its breath. And as cameras zoomed in, catching the first bead of sweat trailing down Leavitt's temple, one question coiled itself into the mind of every viewer, refusing to let go. If the truth is so clear, why does power always fight so hard to bury it? The silence shattered when Jasmine Crockett rose from her seat and slammed a thick folder onto the table. The echo ricocheted through the chamber like a gunshot. A massive screen behind her lit up, and in bold black letters an email appeared, its subject line frozen in time. "Reconfigure numbers to fit POTUS narrative." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters lunged forward. Cameras clicked like machine gun fire. Jasmine's eyes never left Karoline Leavitt, who sat frozen, lips parted, her rehearsed smile gone. Jasmine pointed to the glowing words, her voice sharp as steel. This is your signature, isn't it? Tell America why you rewrote reality at the command of your boss." Leavitt inhaled sharply, her voice trembling but defiant. "That's not what it looks like. The media has twisted." Jasmine cut her off, slamming her hand against the desk. "No, don't you dare blame the media. You lie. You lied to America. And tonight, America deserves to hear you admit it." The chamber erupted. Jen Jordan jumped to his feet, shouting into his microphone, "Point of order. This is character assassination." His voice was drowned out by Jasmine's sharp retort. She spun toward him, eyes blazing. "Sit down, Jim. This isn't a wrestling match in Ohio. This is Congress, and your shouting won't drown out the truth." The audience at home, exploded. Millions sitting in living rooms felt vindicated as Jasmine sliced through the grandstanding. Jordan slumped back in his chair, his face red, fists clenched but powerless. Marjorie Taylor Greene barked from the side, "This is a witch hunt." Jasmine turned slowly, her words cutting like a knife. "If exposing lies is a witch hunt, then I'll wear that crown proudly." The air quaked with tension. Leavitt fumbled with her notes, her hands shaking so violently that the papers slipped to the floor. The camera zoomed in on her panic, every flicker of fear magnified for the nation to see. Jasmine leaned forward, voice slower now, deliberate, dangerous. "Do you know what it feels like for families in Ward 7 and 8, where you claimed half the arrests happened? Mothers burying sons because of policies rooted in your doctored numbers. Do you understand what it means to weaponize lies against your own citizens?" Leavitt stammered. I was only following." Jasmine slammed the desk again, eyes narrowing like a blade closing in on its mark. "Following what? Orders, or your own ambition to prop up a man who turned truth into his campaign slogan while feeding America poison?" The crowd outside roared, their chants vibrating through the Capitol walls. The chamber felt less like a hearing and more like a trial carried out before the eyes of a nation starved for honesty. Reporters scribbled furiously, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. Crockett slams Leavitt with explosive email. Leavitt's voice shrank. "You don't understand." Jasmine leaned closer, her final words searing into the silence. "No, Karoline, it's you who doesn't understand. You can't bury the truth buries you." And as the camera zoomed in on Leavitt's trembling face, the hook burned into every viewer's mind. How far will they go to silence one woman's truth? The chamber felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The roar of voices outside pulsed through the walls, but inside, the silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the cameras. Jasmine Crockett leaned in, her voice razor sharp. "Who ordered you?" The words didn't echo, they struck, hanging in the air like a blade suspended over Karoline Leavitt's head. The camera zoomed so close you could see the sweat beat at her hairline, the way her hands trembled against the polished wood of the table. Leavitt's lips parted, but nothing came out. The mask she had worn into the chamber, the practice smirk, the forced confidence was crumbling in real time. Every second of her silence screamed louder than any denial. Reporters exchanged wide-eyed glances, pens hovered above paper, waiting for the collapse. Jasmine didn't flinch, her tone dropped lower, steadier, each syllable a nail driven into the coffin of Leavitt's composure. "Don't look at your notes, don't look at Jordan, look at me. And tell this country, who told you to lie." The chamber seemed to shrink, the distance between the two women evaporating into something primal, predator and prey locked in a battle neither could escape. Leavitt's chest heaved, she glanced to her right, where Jim Jordan gestured frantically for her to hold her ground, mouthing words she couldn't process. Marjorie Taylor Greene slammed her hand on the desk, shouting, "This is harassment," but the microphones didn't pick her up. The nation only heard the silence, only saw Leavitt's eyes darting like a cornered animal. "I was trying to protect the administration," Leavitt stammered, her voice so thin it barely carried. Jasmine pounced, "Protect the administration or protect one man's campaign?" "Who? Karoline. Who signed the order?" The cameras caught everything, the shake in her hands, the shallow breaths, the flicker of terror as if she could feel the weight of 330 million Americans pressing down on her. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The chamber leaned in. Reporters froze, even the protesters outside quieted, as if the entire country was holding its breath for the same word. Finally, in a voice so fragile it barely reached the first row, Leavitt whispered, "Trump." The microphone crackled, catching only fragments, just enough for the nation to hear a name, just enough to ignite a wildfire of disbelief. Gasps erupted from the gallery, a reporter dropped his pen. Jeanine Pirro's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening like steel. Jasmine sat back, her gaze unrelenting, the ghost of a grim smile crossing her lips. She didn't need to gloat. The damage was done. The lie had cracked. America had heard it or had it. Was it a slip, a confession, or the unraveling of the most dangerous cover-up in modern history? And as the screen cut to Leavitt's pale, broken face, one question seared itself into the mind of every viewer. Did America just hear the first admission of a cover-up order from the very top of power itself? The word Trump still lingered in the chamber like smoke after an explosion, but before it could settle, the GOP bench erupted. Jim Jordan slammed his fist on the table, his voice straining through the microphone. This is outrageous, a witch hunt, plain and simple. Representative Crockett is weaponizing this committee to destroy a former president. His words boomed, but they rang desperate, almost panicked. Marjorie Taylor Greene leaned forward, stabbing her finger toward Jasmine like a dagger. You are unpatriotic. You don't love this country, you love your agenda. You are dividing America by weaponizing race. The word sliced through the silence, and gasps echoed from the gallery. The attack wasn't subtle, it was venom. Jasmine didn't blink. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, but her eyes burned with a steady fire. She rose slowly, letting the fury in the room build like a storm gathering strength. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, but it cut sharper than any scream. Truth isn't partisan. Truth is survival. The chamber went still. Even the protesters outside paused their chants, as if the line had pierced through walls and airwaves alike. Jordan barked again, desperate to reclaim the floor. You are undermining democracy itself. But Jasmine turned on him, her glare like a blade. No, Congressman. Democracy dies when leaders feed lies to their people. Democracy dies when women like Karoline rewrite reality to please the man who signs their checks. Her words landed like punches, each syllable tightening the noose around their defense. Greene tried to shout her down, but her microphone screeched and cut, leaving only Jasmine's voice ringing clear across the chamber. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameramen zoomed in, catching Jordan's flushed cheeks, Greene's twisting fury, and Jasmine's unshaken stance. The image was stark, one woman against an army, and yet she looked like the only warrior in the room. Social media exploded, hashtags blazed across the screen. Hashtag truth is survival. Hashtag stand with Jasmine. Outside, the crowd roared again, louder than before, their chants synchronizing into a thunderous beat that rattled the windows. Leavitt sat frozen, her face pale, her earlier whisper still poisoning the air. She glanced toward her defenders, but their outburst seemed hollow, theatrical, stripped of their power. Jasmine saw it too. She leaned closer to the microphone, lowering her voice until it forced everyone to lean in. If the truth terrifies you more than crime itself, what are you really protecting? America, or your own corruption? The words struck like lightning, splitting the chamber into shock and silence. Jordan clenched his jaw. Green seat. Leavitt sank deeper into her chair. The cameras lingered on Jasmine, her figure framed against the banners outside flashing through the windows. Truth matters. And in that unbearable stillness, one question gripped every viewer across the nation, echoing in their minds with the weight of prophecy. Why does the truth scare them more than crime itself? By dawn, the confrontation had exploded beyond the walls of the Capitol. Fox News rolled the clip on repeat, but spliced Jasmine's words, painting her as a radical who had bullied a young press secretary into tears. The chyron screamed, Crockett weaponizes race, democracy under attack. Across the screen, Jordan and Greene were replayed as defenders of patriotism, their interruptions reframed as courage. Meanwhile, CNN broadcasted the exact same footage. Uncut, raw, the moment Leavitt whispered Trump's name, the crack in the armor magnified in slow motion, the chamber's gas stretched into an earthquake. Their headline read, Leavitt implicates Trump in crime data cover-up, 2 networks, 1 nation, and 2 different realities colliding in real time. Ordinary Americans sat in diners, airports, living rooms, watching with slack jaws and furrowed brows. One man in Ohio slammed his fist on the counter. So who the hell is lying to us? A woman in Atlanta whispered to her daughter, don't believe everything on TV, but don't stop watching either. Confusion thickened like fog, leaving families divided, neighbors clashing, social media seething. By noon, Twitter had fractured into warring camps. Hashtag truth vs lies trending globally, a battlefield of digital rage where facts bled out beneath memes, fury, and propaganda. Jasmine scrolled through her phone alone in her office, the glow of the screen etching exhaustion across her face. Hate mail poured in, messages laced with venom. Traitor. You'll regret this. You've declared war on America. One envelope arrived with a bullet casing taped inside. No words needed. She held it in her hands, The metal cold, a reminder of what truth costs in a country tearing itself apart. Her staff begged her to take security details home, but Jasmine only shook her head. "If I run from this, then they've already won." Her voice cracked, but her eyes held. The weight was crushing. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling as the chants outside her window carried faintly into the night, supporters still screaming truth matters, even as death threats piled at her doorstep. For a flicker of a moment, despair seeped in. Was it worth it? To stand alone in a storm designed to drown her? She remembered the families she had spoken for, the mothers clutching photographs of sons lost in neighborhoods branded as statistical hot zones by falsified reports. She remembered their tears, and her spine straightened again. Determination burned through the doubt. On the evening news, anchors debated whether Jasmine had gone too far. While her face appeared on every screen, in America some calling her a savior, others a destroyer. Children whispered her name at dinner tables, senators muttered it in hushed meetings. She was no longer just a congresswoman, she was the fracture line splitting the nation open. And as the country spiraled deeper into chaos, one question lingered louder than the headlines, echoing across screens and hearts alike. When facts are under attack, who do you trust? The Capitol hadn't even caught its breath from the media firestorm when a new crack split the silence wide open. At 7:43 a.m., Politico dropped an article that detonated across every phone screen in America. Leaked DOJ memos confirm probe into fabricated crime data. The headline was more than sensational, it was damning. Inside were scanned documents stamped confidential, revealing that the Department of Justice had been quietly investigating falsified crime reports for weeks. Margins were littered with notes, one memo bluntly reading, "Evidence suggests direct manipulation of statistics for political gain." Subject: White House communications. The whistleblower remained anonymous, but the memos carried weight no spin could erase. Cable news scrambled, anchors stuttered lead as they pieced together what it meant. If true, the cover-up wasn't rumor, it was systemic, orchestrated, and rooted in the very office that claimed to defend law and order. Overnight, the story that had split the country into opinion became something more terrifying. Fact. Outside the Capitol, the protests swelled into a movement. Crowds stretched for blocks, waving handmade signs. "Numbers don't lie. People do. Truth is patriotic. And we see you, Trump." Chants thundered through the streets, shaking windows, drowning out traffic. Drone shots capture aerial images of thousands gather, their bodies forming a river of outrage flowing straight toward the marble steps of Congress. Reporters broadcasted live, voices straining over the roar. The people are no longer just watching, they are demanding. Inside her office, Jasmine read the leaked memos in stunned silence, her chest rising and falling with the weight of vindication. Every accusation she had hurled, every moment she had been called a liar, was notched in black ink under the DOJ's seal. She clenched the papers in her fist, knowing the risk of speaking louder had just doubled, but so had her power. Her phone buzzed non-stop, supporters offering solidarity, detractors spewing threats, but one message stood out. It was a single line from an unknown number. "Careful, you're closer to the flame than you realize." She looked out the window, watching the crowd pulse like a living organism, and whispered to herself, "Closer is exactly where I need to be." The cameras soon captured her stepping onto the Capitol steps, her voice carried by microphones, her words swallowed by chants before they even finished. "They said we were imagining lies. Today, the lies have confessed themselves." The crowd erupted, the sound rising into the sky, broadcast across every television set in the nation. Panic rippled through the opposition. Fox hosts scrambled, Republicans scrambled. Leavitt disappeared from view for hours, leaving only silence where her defense should have been. Social media caught fire. Hashtags colliding, hashtag DOJ leak, hashtag truth exposed, hashtag Crockett was right. The narrative was no longer a debate. It was evidence. And as night fell on a Capitol lit by cell phones held high like torches, one question surged through the noise and refused to be silenced. Is this the smoking gun that could finally bring the powerful crashing down? The leak had detonated like a bomb, but Jasmine knew paper trails alone couldn't pierce America's heart. So she reached for what numbers could never capture, the flesh and blood toll. She rose with a photograph in her hand, edges worn. The image of a teenage boy in a football jersey frozen in time. "This is Marcus," she said, voice breaking against the chamber's stillness. 17 years old, shot outside a corner store in Ward 7. The official report blamed it on undocumented immigrants. But the truth, his killer was no immigrant. His killer was born right here in D.C., a gasp swept through the gallery. Reporters' pens scratched frantically as cameras zoomed on the photograph. Then came the sound of heels against marble. Marcus's mother stepping forward, clutching the frame of her son so tightly, trembled in her hands. Her voice cracked as she sat before the microphone. They didn't just steal my child, they stole the truth of who he was. The papers said his death was part of some immigrant crime wave. That lie turned my grief into propaganda. Her words rang like a siren, raw, jagged, unforgettable. Next, Jasmine brought forward another voice, a father from El Salvador, legal resident for over a decade, his English broken but his pain clear. He told the story of being arrested during a sweep triggered by those falsified crime maps, his 6-year-old daughter screaming as agents pressed him against his own car. Released without charges, but not without scars. His hands shook as he pointed toward the officials on the dais. You turned my family into a number. You made my daughter believe her papa was a criminal. How do I explain to her that it was all just politics? The chamber grew heavier with every word. Lawmakers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A reporter wiped away a tear before scribbling again. Outside, the chants rose like rolling thunder, the crowd echoing the pain that now filled the chamber. Truth matters, truth matters. Inside, silence had become a weapon. Jasmine let it linger until the weight crushed even the loudest defenders. Her eyes locked on Leavitt, who sat rigid, skin pale, lips pressed so tightly they seemed bloodless. Jasmine leaned into the microphone, her tone sharpened to a blade. This is not about charts or headlines. This is about mothers forced to bury their children under a lie. Fathers branded as criminals so a campaign could polish its slogan. These people bled for your numbers. The silence afterward wasn't empty, it was suffocating. Every heartbeat in the chamber seemed louder than words. Jasmine's final question landed like a verdict, echoing through every screen, every living room, every conscience across the nation. How many lives were broken for a political narrative? The testimonies still hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, their weight pressing down on every soul in the chamber. Leavitt's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table, her chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. The mask of composure she had fought to keep was gone. What remained was raw, exposed fear mutating into rage. Suddenly, her voice cut through the silence, brittle yet venomous. You people just want chaos, she shouted, her words cracking like glass against stone. You don't care about the truth, you care about tearing this country apart, the chamber gasped. Even Jordan and Green, her fiercest allies, froze for a fraction of a second, realizing the outburst had ripped away whatever dignity she had left. But Jasmine didn't hesitate. She rose slowly, every motion deliberate, her eyes locked on Leavitt with a glare that burned hotter than fire. No, Jasmine replied, her voice measured, slicing clean through the nose. We don't want chaos, we want justice. And chaos comes from your lies. The words landed like a thunderclap. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Cameras zoomed tight on Leavitt's trembling face. Her lips twisted, caught between a snarl and a plea. But Jasmine's voice surged louder, refusing to let the moment slip. Look outside, Karoline. Do you hear them? The chants roared through the walls. Truth matters, truth matters. A sound that drowned out even the marble echo of the chamber. Jasmine pointed toward the windows, her finger trembling not with fear, but with fury. That is not chaos. That is America demanding an end to the betrayal you helped orchestrate. Leavitt tried to recover, words tumbling out too fast. I was just doing my job. I was protecting the administration. I was. Jasmine slammed her hand down, the sharp crack jolting the room. No, you weren't protecting America. You were protecting a man, one man. And in doing so, you sacrificed millions. You sacrificed mothers, fathers, children, all for numbers that were never real. Her voice dropped lower, colder, cutting even deeper. And now you sit there, daring to call the outrage you created chaos. No, Karoline. What you feel pressing against you tonight is not chaos, it's consequence. The chamber shook with the gravity of her words. Reporters exchanged glances, realizing this was no longer about politics. This was survival, a battle between truth and the edifice of a presidency built on deceit. Leavitt's eyes glistened, her shoulders trembling as she tried to hold the weight of the lies she carried. Her body seemed smaller now, her defiance a thin shell cracking under the relentless pounding of truth. Jasmine leaned in, her final words dripping with fury and resolve. "So tell us, Karoline, how long can one woman carry the lies of a presidency before they crush her completely?" And as the camera froze on Leavitt's haunted expression, that question thundered into every living room across the nation, demanding an answer America was no longer willing to wait for. The chamber had become a furnace, the air thick with fury, shame, and the pounding weight of truth. Karoline Leavitt's face was drained of color, her hands shaking so violently that the papers in front of her rattled against the microphone. Cameras zoomed in, merciless, capturing every twitch of her jaw, every flicker of fear in her eyes. For a moment she stared down at her notes as though the printed words could shield her, but then her body seemed to fold under its own weight. Her voice broke before her words did. Yes, parts of the data were adjusted. The words tumbled out ragged, unfinished, but the chamber reacted as if a bomb had detonated. Gasps, shouts, the thunder of reporters bolting from their seats to file headlines. Leavitt admits adjustment of crime data. The chyron flashed across news broadcasts within minutes, streaming live to every living room in America. Jasmine didn't move. She sat like a statue carved of fire and iron, her silence heavier than accusation. Leavitt's shoulders slumped. Her eyes darted from Jordan to Green, searching for rescue, but even they seemed stunned, caught between loyalty and the realization that her words had just set the narrative ablaze. I didn't make this up alone," she stammered, her breath hitching. "I was told to make the numbers look worse, to prove the city was lawless, to prove." She stopped, choking back the name trembling on her lips, her eyes wide as if she had seen her own noose tightening. The nation fractured instantly. On one side, viewers whispered, "She's finally telling the truth." On the other, rage poured in, branding her a traitor who had turned on her own cause. Fox News anchors framed her as a pressured woman cracking under hostility. A forced confession, CNN replayed her every word in slow motion, dissecting the tremor in her voice, the slip of her tongue, the damning phrase "I didn't make this up alone." America no longer shared one reality, it was two nations staring into the same camera lens, seeing different ghosts. Outside the Capitol, protesters erupted, their chants morphing into a tidal wave. Some screamed her name as if she had redeemed herself. Others burned her image on cardboard effigies, branding her the face of betrayal. Inside, her mascara streaked down her face, a picture of collapse broadcast in high definition across the world. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice low, dangerous, almost tender in its finality. "The truth was never yours to rewrite, Karoline. And tonight, it's slipping out of your hands faster than you can hold it." The silence after her words was suffocating. Leavitt buried her face in her hands, microphones catching the shallow rhythm of her sobs. Reporters scribbled furiously, the cameras never blinked. America was no longer watching a hearing, it was watching a reckoning unravel in real time. And as the feed cut between Jasmine's burning stare and Leavitt's shattered figure, one question roared louder than the chants, louder than the headlines, louder than the sobs echoing in the chamber. Was this confession just a crack or the beginning of an avalanche that would bury the powerful alive? The fallout from Leavitt's breakdown had barely settled when the inevitable happened. At 2:17 a.m., Donald Trump took to his platform, his words scrawled in the familiar frenzy of capital letters: "Witch hunt. DC lies. Jasmine lies. They fabricate crime. They fabricate stories. And they want to destroy your favorite president." Within minutes, the post was flashing across every cable network, dissected, replayed, injected into the veins of an already fractured nation. His fury was undeniable, but so was the stench of fear beneath it. Supporters cheered, riposting his words like a battle cry. MAGA rallies erupted outside state houses overnight, red hats raised, chants of "Stand with Trump," shaking the dark streets. But in equal measure came the backlash. Tens of thousands poured into DC again, chanting Jasmine's name, waving placards that screamed "Truth is patriotism" and "Enough lies." America wasn't just split. It was combusting, two realities colliding in real time. Back in the Capitol chamber, Jasmine sat before a sea of microphones, her face illuminated by the glare of television lights. Reporters hurled questions about Trump's midnight rant, their voices overlapping in chaos. She raised a hand, and the nose fell silent. Her voice, steady but crackling with fire, cut through the static. If he's innocent, why hide behind lies? If he has nothing to fear, why scream in the shadows instead of facing us under oath? The line was replayed within minutes, a direct shot across Trump's bow, unflinching and lethal. The tension escalated instantly. Trump posted again. Jasmine Crockett is a fraud. She wants to destroy America. I built the safest capital in history, and they know it. The words scrolled across screens as breaking news tickers screamed Trump strikes back, yet in living rooms across America. The image of Jasmine leaning into that microphone, unbothered, unbroken, was the one that stuck. Outside, as night descended, the chants of dueling crowds clashed like thunder. One side screamed "Lock her up," while the other roared "Stand with Jasmine." Helicopters circled above, their searchlights carving streaks through the darkness, and as America watched, holding its collective breath, one question seared through the nose, heavier than Trump's rants, sharper than Jasmine's fire. Is Trump losing control of his own narrative, or is the nation about to lose control of itself? By the time dawn broke over Washington, the Justice Department had fired its first shot. Subpoenas rolled out like thunder across the Capitol, dozens of them demanding internal communications, White House memos, raw datasets, every scrap of evidence connected to the doctored crime statistics. The headlines erupted. DOJ expands probe into White House cover-up. The message was clear. This was no longer just a hearing. It was war. In a press conference that afternoon, Jeanine Pirro stood at the podium, her voice taut, eyes cold as steel. The American people deserve the truth. A public evidence hearing has been scheduled. Every document, every testimony, every directive tied to this scandal will be examined before the nation. The words rolled like an earthquake, shaking even those who thought themselves untouchable. Reporters fired questions like bullets. Does this implicate the former president? Is the White House itself under investigation? Pirro didn't flinch. No one, she said, is above the law. And in living rooms across the country, millions whispered the same name, Jasmine Crockett. Her face had become the symbol of defiance, the spark that forced the DOJ to act. Editorials crowned her the catalyst of accountability. Protesters painted murals of her on city walls, fists raised, eyes blazing. Outside the Capitol, the crowd surged larger than ever, a sea of humanity demanding answers. The Capitol, the crowd surged larger than ever, a sea of humanity demanding answers. Truth or nothing. They roared, their chants echoing against the marble columns like the heartbeat of a restless republic. Inside, lawmakers felt the ground shifting beneath them. Some Republicans scrambled to distance themselves, murmuring that perhaps the data had been misunderstood. Others doubled down, raging louder, accusing Jasmine of colluding with the DOJ to stage a coup. But the subpoenas told another story. Sign, stamped, official. The walls were closing in, and America could smell fear in the air. Jasmine walked the steps of the Capitol that night, flanked by supporters chanting her name. Cameras swarmed, flashes bursting like fireworks. She didn't raise her fist or shout slogans. She simply looked into the lens, her voice steady, cutting through the noise. This isn't my victory. This is the people's demand for truth finally breaking through the lies. The footage went viral, played on every major network, spliced into montages of the protests outside, and the subpoenas flashing across screens. But even as the crowd swelled, tension coiled tighter. Whispers leaked from closed-door meetings, allies of Trump plotting countermoves, sympathetic judges stalling proceedings, dark money funneling into disinformation campaigns to muddy the waters. America teetered between triumph and betrayal, justice and manipulation, as if balanced on the edge of a knife. And as the Capitol glowed under the floodlights, banners waving in the night air, one question lingered heavier than any chant, sharper than any headline. Will justice finally triumph, or will power find a way to rewrite the ending again? The subpoenas had barely cooled in their envelopes when the streets of Washington ignited. By nightfall, the avenues surrounding the Capitol were no longer protests, they were battle lines. On one side, a sea of red hats, their chants thundering "Stand with Trump" and "Stop the witch hunt." On the other, thousands waving handmade signs that screamed truth or nothing and justice for all. Between them, a wall of riot police stood shoulder to shoulder, shields raised, batons posed, helicopters circling above with searchlights that carved the night into shards of white. The first clash came fast and brutal. A bottle flew from the crowd, shattering against a police shield. Then fists, flags, and flares followed. The two mobs surged forward, colliding like tidal waves, fists and fury breaking across human barricades. Cameras capture everything: mothers pulled back by officers, teenagers coughing from pepper spray, men swinging metal flagpoles as weapons. The air filled with smoke and the shrieks of sirens, a soundtrack of chaos echoing across the capital of the world's oldest democracy. Inside the chamber, lawmakers watched live coverage in stunned silence. Jasmine Crockett gripped the edge of her desk, her face illuminated by the flicker of violent images on the screen. She rose, walked toward the podium, and demanded airtime. Within minutes, every network cut back to the chamber as she stepped into the spotlight, her voice urgent but steady. America, listen to me. Do not let lies divide us further. Violence is not justice. Violence is the mask of fear. And fear is what brought us here tonight. Her words poured across televisions, radios, live streams, drowning for a brief moment the roar of rage outside. But on the streets, the line between order and collapse blurred. Fireworks exploded above the crowd. Police sirens wailed. Chants drowned each other out. Some protesters began linking arms, chanting peaceful, while others pushed forward with rage. The nation watched in real time as its capital trembled on the edge of anarchy. Jasmine's plea echoed louder than the screams outside. The truth does not need fists to fight. The truth stands when lies fall. But if we destroy each other, who will be left to carry it? For a fleeting moment, the violence slowed, the chants faltered. Supporters and critics alike turned toward the giant screens broadcasting her face live across the city, her words forcing their way into the chaos like a flare in the dark. Reporters whispered into their microphones, "This isn't just a scandal anymore. This is a nation tearing at its own seams." The streets simmered, fragile, like a powder keg awaiting a single spark to explode again. And as America held its breath, one question thundered above the smoke and broken glass. Can the truth heal a fractured nation or break it further apart? The clashes in the streets had barely subsided when the threats began to pour in. It started with anonymous emails, lines of venom typed in all caps, "Traitor, you won't live to see the next hearing." Then came the phone calls, the silence on the other end broken only by heavy breathing. Soon, it escalated. Jasmine's staff found envelopes slipped under her office door, some containing nothing but a single bullet casing, others with photographs of her family crudely defaced. The message was clear. She wasn't just under attack in the chamber anymore. She was prey. Her family became the next target. Her mother's house was followed by a black SUV that lingered at the corner for hours. Her brother received threatening notes on his windshield, each one uglier than the last. At night, her daughter called in tears, begging her to stop. "Mom, what if they come for us?" Jasmine listened, her hand pressed hard against her forehead, her eyes brimming with the fear she refused to show in public. The smear campaigns hit next. Right-wing tabloids splashed her face across their front pages with headlines like "Crockett, Dangerous Radical," and "The Woman Trying to Burn America Down." Social media flooded with doctored images, false rumors, whispers that she was on the payroll of foreign powers. Friends texted her late at night, worry, asking if any of it was true. She never blamed them for asking. Lies have a way of sounding louder than truth when screamed from enough rooftops. And yet, in the quiet hours, when the building was empty and her security detail patrolled the dark halls, Jasmine admitted the truth to herself. She was afraid. Afraid for her family, afraid for her life, afraid of how deep this rabbit hole went. But fear, she realized, was exactly what her enemies wanted. To silence her, to shrink her, to make her walk away from the very fight she had sworn to wage. And so, she made a choice. She would not step back. In her next press conference, Jasmine looked directly into the cameras, her voice steady, though her hands trembled just out of frame. "I know the threats, I've seen the smears. And yes, I am afraid. But fear is not a reason to walk away. Fear is a reason to stand taller. If telling the truth puts a target on my back, then so be it. Because I would rather carry that target than live one more day in silence." The room erupted, reporters stunned by her candor, supporters erupting in cheers outside. But in living rooms across America, the image was seared into memory. A woman alone against the storm, fragile yet unbroken, blooded in spirit, but unbowed in will. And as the cameras lingered on her defiant stare, one question dug itself into the conscience of the nation. How much must one pay to defend the truth? The threats had grown so loud that Jasmine's nights were no longer nights, they were long corridors of shadows and footsteps. But on this night, she stepped into the back seat of an unmarked sedan, her heart pounding with a rhythm that matched the hum of the engine. The driver said nothing. They wound through side streets of D.C., past alleys washed in pale yellow streetlight, until the car stopped beside an abandoned warehouse by the Anacostia River. It was nearly midnight, the city's nose muted, the air sharp and electric. She had been told only one thing: come alone. Inside, a single bulb swung from the ceiling, casting jagged light across a figure hunched over a folder. The whistleblower's face was half hidden beneath a baseball cap, voice low and clipped. Congresswoman. Leavitt wasn't the only one, she was just the mouthpiece. They all knew. He slid the folder across the table. Jasmine hesitated, then opened it. Page after page of internal directives, stamped and signed, flowed before her eyes: emails, phone transcripts, memos with unmistakable seals. Each one revealed the same command: adjust figures to reinforce POTUS messaging. Jasmine's breath caught. Names leapt off the page, not just Leavitt, but senior advisors, deputies, data chiefs, even to cabinet-level officials. It wasn't one woman carrying lies, it was an entire machine. My God, Jasmine whispered, her hand trembling over the evidence. This wasn't mismanagement. This was an operation. The whistleblower leaned forward, his voice a rasp, and it went deeper than crime numbers. They created patterns, hotspots, even predictive models, all built to terrify the public and justify federal control. This wasn't just about winning headlines. It was about power. The revelation was a dagger. Jasmine felt her stomach twist, fury and dread mixing like acid in her veins. She remembered the mothers, the fathers, the children whose lives had been shattered by those statistics, and now, she realized, their pain had been engineered, calculated, weaponized. She shut the folder, her jaw tightening. If this is true, she said slowly, then this isn't just Leavitt's lie. It's a conspiracy that touches the presidency itself. The whistleblower's eyes darted toward the door. I risk everything bringing this to you. They'll know it's missing, and when they do, they'll come for me. And for you. The light above them flickered, the shadows stretching long and jagged across the concrete floor. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence louder than any scream. Jasmine finally stood, clutching the folder to her chest. Her voice was quiet, but unyielding. Then let them come, because hiding is how they win. And I refuse to let them win. As she stepped back into the night, the weight of the folder pressed heavy against her ribs. It wasn't just evidence, it was dynamite, the kind that could topple careers, institutions, maybe even the republic itself. The headlights of the sedan blinked once in the dark, and the city seemed to hold its breath. And as Jasmine disappeared into the shadows with the proof of a conspiracy in her hands, one question blazed across the conscience of a nation: if the rod runs deeper, how many will fall? By the next morning, Jasmine was no longer walking alone. The folder from the midnight meeting still weighed heavy in her hands, but when she stepped onto the Capitol steps, she was met by a wall of sound chants, songs, voices rising from every corner of America. Civil rights leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with her, veterans of Selma and Ferguson alike, their fists raised high. Beside them, pastors, rabbis, and imams prayed aloud, their words weaving into a chorus of defiance. It was no longer just a protest, it was a movement. From across the country they came, African American mothers clutching photos of sons lost to violence mislabeled by doctor reports. Latino workers carrying signs that read, "We are not your scapegoats." Immigrant families wrapped in flags, chanting in broken but unyielding English, "Truth belongs to all of us." Their voices blended into something primal, a sound that shook the marble steps beneath Jasmine's feet. The crowd wasn't asking anymore. They were demanding. The cameras captured it all in sweeping shots that played across the evening news, 1,000 candles flickering in unison, the roar of voices echoing through the National Mall, banners painted with Jasmine's name held high above the crowd. The image was electric. Commentators compared it to the marches of the 1960s, a revival of a spirit thought lost. She lit the match. One reporter whispered into a live feed, "But this is the fire." Inside the chamber, lawmakers shifted nervously. They could hear the chants bleeding through the walls, rattling the chandeliers, drowning their whispers. Even those who had mocked Jasmine just days before could no longer deny the sight outside the country was moving, and it was moving with her. But Jasmine knew the cost of leading such a wave. With every chant of her name came another threat, another headline branding her dangerous. Still, as she stepped up to the podium flanked by voices of every shade and story, her resolve only hardened. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the young and the old, at the families who had carried their pain into the streets, and she spoke with a voice that shook the air. This fight isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who has ever been silenced, scapegoated, erased. They thought fear would divide us, but look around, fear has united us. And when lies fall, truth does not need one voice, it needs all of us. The cheers that followed were deafening, spilling into every living room in America. Supporters wept openly, strangers hugged in the streets, even hardened reporters felt their throats tighten. For the first time in weeks of chaos, fragile hope pulsed like a heartbeat across the nation. And as the camera pulled back, showing Jasmine dwarfed by the endless sea of people chanting her name, one question seared into the conscience of America: can one woman ignite a movement powerful enough to outlive her? The chamber was overflowing, a sea of reporters, lawmakers, aides, and cameras crammed into every corner. Outside, thousands pressed against barricades, their chants echoing through the marble walls. Networks from every continent carried the broadcast live, banners flashing across the screen. The second hearing, the nation awaits. Even in living rooms thousands of miles away, Americans sat frozen, sensing history was about to split wide open. When Jasmine Crockett stepped into the chamber, the room fell into an almost reverent silence. She carried a thick binder, not just paper, but weight, the kind of weight that could topple presidencies. Her eyes burned with resolve as she walked past glaring opponents and whispering allies. She didn't flinch, she didn't bow. She climbed the dais, placed the binder on the polished wood, and looked straight into the cameras as if addressing the entire world. Her voice was steady, but every word crackled with tension. For weeks, you've heard denial after denial. They called this a witch hunt, they called me a liar. But today, you will see the truth not in my words, but in theirs. She opened the binder, lifted the first document, and held it high. The camera zoomed in, an internal campaign memo, stamped with the Trump campaign seal, outlining strategic manipulation of urban crime statistics to sway suburban voters. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Jasmine turned the page. Another memo, signed by senior aides, explicitly instructing staff to inflate immigrant-related crime to stoke public fear. Senators shifted uncomfortably, aides scribbled frantic notes, and somewhere in the back row, a Republican lawmaker buried his face, his hands. The air grew heavier with each page she revealed. It was no longer speculation, no longer rumor, it was documented, deliberate deceit. The disbelief was palpable. One network anchor whispered into a hot mic, "This is worse than Watergate." Another called it the biggest electoral fraud scheme in modern history. Twitter erupted, hashtags flooding in real time, hashtag truth unveiled, hashtag Crockett files, hashtag end of the lie. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it quivered like a string about to snap. Then she leaned into the microphone, her voice sharp as a blade. They told you immigrants were the problem. They told you your neighbors were criminals. But the only crime that happened was committed right here in the heart of power. And today, the cover-up ends, the chamber erupted into chaos. Some lawmakers shouted in rage, others sat stunned into silence. The camera panned across faces, some pale, some furious, some visibly shaken. Outside, the crowd roared as word spread. For a moment, it felt as if the very foundations of Washington trembled under the weight of truth finally dragged into the light. And as Jasmine closed the binder with a decisive thud, her words echoed into living rooms and headlines across the globe. This is not just evidence, this is the reckoning. The question burned hotter than ever, pressing against the walls of the Capitol and the conscience of a divided nation. Is this the moment America changes forever? The chamber was suffocating with tension, every breath heavy with expectation. Karoline Leavitt sat at the witness table, her shoulders stiff, her lips pressed tight as cameras zoomed in to capture the sweat glistening at her temple. She adjusted her microphone, the scrape echoing in the silence. For weeks, she had been the administration's shield, the voice of denial, the iron wall between truth and collapse. Now, the wall was crumbling. Leavitt leaned forward, her voice trembling yet defiant. I did what I believed was necessary to protect this nation. You think you've uncovered corruption, but what you've really done is hand America to its enemies." Murmurs rippled across the chamber, half gasps, half groans. Some clapped lightly at her audacity, others shook their heads in disbelief. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly from her chair, binder in hand. She walked toward Leavitt like a prosecutor in a courtroom, her heels striking the floor in steady rhythm. Without a word, she placed a fresh stack of documents on the witness table and slid them forward. The cameras caught the header: Internal Directives, Data Manipulation, approved by K. Leavitt. Leavitt froze, her eyes darted to the pages, then back to Jasmine. Her voice cracked. Those were drafts, not final orders." "You don't understand the pressure we were under." Jasmine cut her off, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. "Pressure doesn't excuse perjury. Pressure doesn't excuse fabricating crimes. You stood before the American people and chose lies over liberty." She leaned closer, her eyes locked on Leavitt's, "and tonight, liberty wins." The chamber erupted, half in thunderous applause, half in outraged shouts. Leavitt tried to steady herself, but her hands trembled as she reached for the microphone. "You think you're saving democracy," she spat, her voice breaking, "but you're destroying it. History will see me as a defender, not a traitor." Jasmine didn't flinch, she held the room in the palm of her hand. "History doesn't bow to the liar, it bends toward truth. And truth has already marked you." The words landed like a gavel strike. Leavitt's face collapsed into a mask of humiliation, eyes glassy, jaw clenched, her body sinking lower in the chair. The camera zoomed in, catching the silent tear that escaped despite her desperate attempt to hold composure. The once untouchable strategist now looked like a hollow figure trapped beneath the ruins of her own deceit. Outside the Capitol, crowds chanted Jasmine's name, their voices rolling like thunder against the stone. Inside, reporters scribbled frantically, pundits whispered into hot mix, and lawmakers exchanged stunned glances. The tide had shifted, and everyone knew it. As Jasmine stepped back to her seat, the silence stretched before she delivered the final blow. "You built your career on fear, Carrie, but fear cannot outlive truth. Tonight, you fall not as a victim, but as the architect of deceit." The chamber sat in stunned stillness, the echo of her words lingering like a verdict carved into stone. And the question remained, cutting through the nation like a blade: will Leavitt be remembered as a casualty of power or the author of its darkest betrayal? America awoke to headlines that ripped through every screen, every radio, every device. The lie exposed: Crockett shatters the wall. Poll after poll confirmed what no spin doctor could disguise: trust in Donald Trump and his circle had crumbled overnight. His approval ratings plummeted by double digits in less than 24 hours, a collapse so sharp that even his staunchest allies whispered about abandoning ship. On the streets of Washington, murals of Jasmine Crockett appeared on brick walls before the paint had even dried, her face illuminated by the word truth. Cable news anchors spoke in voices they hadn't used in years, voices trembling with the sense of witnessing history. Hashtags exploded across platforms, the most relentless of them blazing across the digital sphere. Hashtag Justice for DC. Millions reposted clips of Jasmine's fiery words, her confrontation with Leavitt replayed in endless loops, her final line, "Fear cannot outlive truth," etched into the national memory. For once, it seemed, America wasn't just consuming scandal. It was rejecting it, yet amid the catharsis lay a simmering dread. Outside jubilant rallies, where crowds waved banners and sang, there were shadows of counter-protests. Armed men stood defiantly with flags, chanting that the verdict was rigged, that Jasmine was a pawn of the deep state. News reports flashed images of clashes in small towns, storefronts shatter, fists raised against neighbors. The victory felt real, but so did the fracture beneath it. Jasmine, standing at the steps of the Capitol as thousands gathered below, looked neither triumphant nor broken. She looked human, tired eyes framed by resolve, her voice steady as she told the crowd, "This is not my victory, it is yours. It is the victory of every family who lived under the weight of a lie, every community scapegoated, every citizen silenced. But let me warn you, truth is never safe. It must be guarded, every day." The crowd roared, tears streaming down the faces of strangers who felt, if only for a moment, united. In living rooms across the nation, families debated what came next. Some saw Jasmine as the spark of a new movement, others feared the retaliation of an empire unwilling to fall. Former Trump allies scrambled to rewrite their own roles in the saga, distancing themselves from the collapse while whispering about survival. The political world reeled, but the deeper question echoed louder than ever. If one confession could unravel so much, how much more lay hidden in the shadows? As night fell, drone footage captured a striking image: tens of thousands in the streets of D.C., phone flashlights raised high, glowing like stars around the Capitol dome. It was both celebration and warning. A people awakened, a people watching. And in that charged silence, the story crystallized into a haunting truth: a single victory can rattle the foundations of deception, but can it rewrite the decades built on its lies? Or is this only the first battle in a war far from over? The gavel had barely cooled from the last hearing when the Department of Justice moved in. Charges multiple, sprawling, and explosive were filed against Trump's inner circle, their names printed across indictments that read like a blueprint of betrayal. Subpoenas expanded, agents combed through encrypted servers, and whispers of sealed evidence hinted that the rot stretched deeper than anyone dared admit. The headlines thundered across America: "Justice unleashed." Trump, furious and unhinged, erupted online: "Witch hunt, treason." He bellowed in all caps, his posts spiraling into a storm of rage, yet the fury only revealed weakness. Inside the GOP, the cracks widened into gaping fractures. Some loyalists clung to him like a sinking ship, while others slipped quietly into the shadows, fearing the political undertow would drag them down too. Senate offices buzzed with rumors of defections, of backroom deals to salvage careers, before the fire consumed them all. And then there was Leavitt, once the loyal face of defiance. She vanished overnight. No press conferences, no fiery defenses, just silence. Her home stood dark, her social media accounts deleted, her name now synonymous with disgrace. Reporters staked out airports, train stations, border crossings, each grainy photo of a woman with a scarf sparking speculation. Had she fled, or was she hiding in plain sight? In her absence, she became a ghostly reminder of what happens when lies collapse under their own weight. For Jasmine, the moment carried both triumph and unease. She had helped rip open the facade, but the victory was laced with dread. The DOJ could prosecute, the public could rage, but would that be enough to untangle years of deception? Outside her window, chants of celebration mixed with warnings shouted by counter-protesters, to Americans staring each other down in the same streets. As the cameras zoomed in on the Capitol, the nation held its breath. The lie had been exposed, but the real test was only beginning. Because the question that haunted every headline, every living room, every whisper in Washington was simple yet devastating: what comes after exposing the lie? And can America survive the answer? The Capitol had gone quiet, its marble corridors echoing with the ghosts of the storm just past. Jasmine sat alone in her office, the city lights flickering beyond the tall windows like distant fires refusing to die. The folders were stacked in neat piles on her desk: evidence, testimonies, fragments of a nation's conscience, but the weight pressing on her chest was heavier than paper. For the first time in weeks, the cameras were gone, the chess outside silenced, leaving her face to face with the cost of truth. She replayed it all in her mind, not the victories, but the threats. The envelope slipped beneath her office door, filled with photographs of her family. The late-night phone calls, the voice dripping venom, promising that her courage would bury her before it saved anyone else. She remembered the trembling in her mother's voice, the fear in her staff's eyes, the unspoken question in every embrace. How much more can you endure? And yet, she had endured. Every insult, every smear, every death threat only deepened the fire in her chest. She remembered standing under the blinding lights of the chamber, her voice steady even as her hands shook, calling out men who had never been challenged before. She remembered the silence after each word, the kind of silence that felt like history, holding its breath. But now, in the solitude of her reflection, the victory tasted bittersweet. Leadership had brought her to the summit, but it had also stripped her bare. Friends had drifted, allies had fallen silent, and the loneliness of carrying a nation's wounds had left her scarred in ways no camera would ever capture. She looked at her own reflection in the darkened glass drawn. Yes, but undeniably changed. Was it worth it? Every scar, every sleepless night, every tear shed in silence, were they enough to redeem a nation's honor, or had the fight merely carved pieces of her soul away? The question burned in her chest. Unspoken yet deafening, was the salvation of America worth the wounds carved into her? And if so, who will carry the scars and the echoes of this battle fade? The air felt heavier than stone. Every television, every phone, every glowing billboard flickered with the same broadcast. Jasmine Crockett standing in the chamber, her voice about to carve itself into history. Outside, America was trembling. Sirens screamed in distant streets. Protesters filled avenues with chants that shook skyscrapers, and the horizon burned with a tension no one could escape. She gripped the podium as if holding the fragile spine of the nation itself. Her eyes narrowed, her tone like thunder breaking through a storm. Truth isn't a weapon. Truth is our last defense. If we abandon it, we abandon ourselves. The words detonated across the country. In cities coast to coast, the lights went out for a heartbeat, then flared again with fire. Crowds flooded the streets, holding candles that looked like stars fallen to earth, but behind them echoed the sound of shattered glass, the tremor of rage and hope colliding. America stood on the edge of collapse, a nation teetering between rebirth and ruin. Some whispered that she had saved democracy. Others warned that she had unleashed the very storm that could end it. Families huddled by their screens, children clutched tighter in their parents' arms, as if waiting for the verdict of destiny itself. And then, in the final breath of the broadcast, Jasmine's voice cut like a blade through the chaos, sharp enough to sear itself into every conscience. I risk everything for the truth. If America falls tonight, it won't be because of lies, it will be because good people stayed silent. So I ask you, what will you risk to keep this nation alive? History is not written by those who hide, it's written by those who refuse to kneel to lies. Jasmine's defiance showed us that one person's bravery can shatter an empire of deceit. But her struggle also warns us, truth is never safe, and justice never guaranteed. They must be defended every single day, in every single choice. The question is no longer about Jasmine, the question is about us. When the shadows creep into your own world, will you step forward with the light or let darkness decide the story? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.